Okay, so this is the end of our longhouse, what we call the longhouse here at Mother Oak Permaculture. And now we're approaching the goat barn, which is really the only building, the only significant building I'm responsible for designing and building, because I caused a fire which burned down the bigger barn that was here that was very handy, but not as handy as this barn. Mostly because the other barn was difficult to store hay because it had a 7-foot ceiling and a really big floor space. So you couldn't stack. So this was designed with just a few goats in mind and either a horse or cows, which is what we have right now. So, well, we'll take a shot of the back. So most of this, what looks like rusted metal, is from the burned barn. And I've used quite a bit of it. As I mentioned, it was a big barn, so we actually had enough, I had enough burn metal to build a fence for the goats. And it's held up through quite a few windstorms. I imagine at some point it's going to fly off if we have a hurricane. But for now it's functioned quite well. The wind comes from the southwest, the worst wind, so I built a windbreak for this building, which is actually just sitting on the gravel pad that was here for the other barn. This building is not sunk in the ground, but it's quite solid. So the windbreak will stop most of the heavy winds from hitting this side of the building. And we have a goat. We have 3 new kids. I don't know if you can, we'll see them probably inside. 2 of them just came yesterday. This is our milking stand. So we get the goat jumps right up there and we sit right here and we milk the goat. So that was just designed right into the barn. It's part of the aisle. There's some branches, which we like to feed our goats leaves, which they love to eat. So we have 3 goat pens. We have one for isolating whatever we want to isolate. And then we have, there's Angie with her babies. You can see them. They can go in and out at will. We can close the hatches if we want. So that little white kid right there was born yesterday afternoon, and it's already running around. And then there's the cows, which must be out in the shade somewhere right now. Oops. Can you get to watch me shovel cow shit while I talk? So the biggest challenge with large livestock here has been to grow enough grass forage on this place in the form of pasture and hay to feed them, and I haven't been able to do that because our land was so damaged and so poor to start with that its yield of grasses isn't enough to keep 2 cows and 2 goats going. And right now there's actually 2 horses that my daughter has. So it could keep 2 going, but not 4. So really our hay yield is trying to feed 4 large animals, and it's not successful. So even after 20 years of trying to improve the soil, it's gotten a lot better in the last 10 years. But the pastures, which we can have a quick look at, are responding very slowly. The one that's directly out here, you can come right in here if you want. Those pastures, there's 3 pastures that are divided into grazing paddocks. The guy who was here for a while in the 80s and 70s, actually, he was doing so poorly. He's the one who had the pig barn built. he sold the topsoil off those fields. So that, and the soil wasn't that good to begin with, especially the subsoil, which is extremely hard, rocky, upland, glacial deposited stuff, clay mostly. And so it's been very difficult to bring them back. The best thing for them so far has been the cows and spreading clover and mowing them. We actually once tried to plow them up, and that wasn't very successful because the plows wouldn't even go down, and the disc harrow wouldn't go down. And basically what came back after we seeded it was the same stuff that was there, which are mostly unpalatable water grasses. And it's very poorly drained, so that's a further challenge. Anyway, the cows, as I said, are the biggest thing, the biggest way for me to improve those fields, and it's been working. So, if you back up and look around the corner there, you'll see the hay crop, which we just finished bringing in yesterday. With our 34 horsepower tractor and a small 5-foot drum mower and a tedder and an ancient square baler. But that worked. So that's half of the hay right there, and it was a small yield this year because of the weather that we had. Last year there were actually, this year we got 6 trailer loads, and last year we had 8 trailer loads. That's 2 trailer, that's 2.5 trailer loads or so. Last year the hay was up to another good 10 feet further, and it was stacked higher. So that's an example of not having enough forage. So I'm actually going to have to buy some hay if I decide to keep my cows, which I might decide not to keep my cows. So anyway, cleaning this stall out like this pretty much on a daily basis, because I like to keep clean bedding for the cows and the goats. Cows are much more challenging than goats because they're wet manure. Anyway, so keeping just a few livestock, especially cattle, and doing most of it manually is much more difficult than keeping a lot of it and just letting machines do everything. However, since we like to eat beef, which I consider to be one of the most ecological meats, because beef can grow and fatten up on that grass, even that poor grass, because we don't have, we have some heritage genetics in our beef, and they seem to do fine. They've raised a few calves out there on that grass. We never feed them grain. They do get roots and culled kale and chard and things like that, but they never get any grain. And so since I do have about 10 acres of pasture plus the hayland, I've decided that I'm going to grow beef because I like to eat meat that I know where it comes from and I know how it's been raised. Everything they say about factory farming, how horrible it is true. But these animals are well looked after. They can go in and out at will. Their offspring, just like the goats, are fully weaned. They're fully nursed by their mothers and live with their mothers. Same with our ducks and our chickens. And so they have as good a life as we can possibly give them and then they have a bad day, which we're all going to have at some point, and then we keep the breeding stock, and basically we eat the offspring. And there's really not much transport involved, and very little packaging involved, and so we're able to fill our freezers with meat, ducks, beef, goats sometimes. We don't, sometimes we give them away or we try to sell them to somebody who wants one, but we also occasionally eat them. So that's how it is. So the manure from the cows, some years I spread it on the pasture land, and other years it goes to the garden. So that's not quite a sustainable cycle there, because the gardens are basically stealing fertility from the hay fields. So occasionally, every few years, I'll buy some industrial hen manure, which really works as a fertilizer, and it is more or less natural, even though it seems a little bit toxic, but it has to go somewhere, and it is from animals, so we compromise and put that on the fields. There's a lot of compromises. If someone tells you that there isn't, they're uninformed or lying. So basically that's it. We have one useful dog sometimes who's really keen on catching rats. So if she smelled a rat, she wouldn't be standing here. Anyway, other than that, it's a pretty closed loop here. I am going to have to buy some hay, but it's a fairly closed loop for the livestock here. Although we do buy some oats and barley to feed the goats, and some minerals and salt. So if we had to do without those things, I think we could manage. We give a lot of different herbs to our goats, a lot of different weeds, a lot of variety, and I'm glad we don't have to just yet do without those few inputs that we buy. But yeah, so we have goat's milk, comes in jars. There's no packaging, and we make some cheese with it, and we like to drink it. So I think that's about it.